I'll put on the red. Yes. Pradeep, so nice to
Hello, how are you?
hello. Congratulations on your book. So nice to
Thank
see
you.
you
Thank
after
you.
such a long time. Way back we met in Bhubaneswar. Pradeep, your book
Yes,
has come out very, very well. Let me congratulate you on that because I'm a
thank you. Thank you.
person and it has got very good reviews and it's going to be very well accepted, I think, in international universities as well as a fantastic case study. And we intend to do a series of interviews with you. So are you
Yeah,
all right with that?
yeah. Thank you, in fact. Thank you that you like the book
Yeah,
and hope that it actually fulfills the intent with which it has been brought out,
exactly.
that it gets the required attention from not only from the policymakers,
Yes,
from people in general, to
yes.
understand how marginalized people, the kind of life they lead,
Mm.
and they do their contribution to change their lives. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, let us further start this first session because this is also, I think, on this itself, we could have 10 sessions almost. It is the very, very sad and tragic death due to starvation of this family of Jintu Bariha. You spell it, pronounce it Bariha, isn't it? And
Yeah, Jintu Varia.
Jintu Bariha. And it is extremely sad to see that the lone survivor of that family, Ram Prasad, who's a 7-year-old
Yes.
boy, he's surviving almost next to nothing food. So, do you think that his grandparents were alive and giving him that kind of scanty food? Grandparents are also having that scanty food, or is it only
Uh,
him
uh,
they are doing this?
yeah, yeah. Let me narrate it.
Mhm.
So it was a story of 2009, from Khaprakhur block of Balangir district in Odisha. You may
Yes.
know that Balangir is part of
Yes.
that infamous KBK
Mhm.
region of Odisha, Koraput, Balangir, and Kalahandi, which is
Mhm.
this kind of poverty belt in Odisha, for that matter, in India.
Mhm.
This is a family, the starvation death. In fact, initially, Jintu Baria's wife,
Mhm.
Bimla Baria, and her two children,
Mhm.
Shiv Prasad, 3-year-old son, and Gundru, 1-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
They died of starvation. That's something we heard from the media report. A small media report came, and in ODA language, and it was termed that these three people died of starvation. Next day, in fact, there was number of coverage in various media, and the same deaths were termed as malaria. So we're surprised. First, it is termed by one journalist as starvation. Next day, all of a sudden, how come it becomes the malaria-related death? So that time, I mean, we, as a journalist, as also associated with Right to Food campaign and the
Mhm.
Supreme Court Commission on Right to Food, which is state advisor here in Odisha. Then we plan to do a fact-finding visit.
Mhm.
I and Samit Panda from Right to Food campaign, the advisor's office, went there and tried to know the region of the death. I'll tell in detail, but the three people died. Then there was an attempt by the government to cover up that. That time, Chintu Baria was alive. Actually, he was ill. He was taken to the hospital in Balangir. We met Chintu Baria and his elder son Ram Prasad
Mhm.
in the Balangir district hospital itself. So there I asked Ram Prasad. He was 7-year-old then. Then I asked, "What do you eat?" And he says, "Okay, in the morning I eat popped rice,
Ui,
mudi in
ui.
our language,
Mhm.
mudi." And that's something his grandparents give in during lunch. He takes rice and salt. That's all, or something spinach collected from
Yes, yes,
locally.
collected.
And
Mhm.
then I insisted, "What do you eat in dinner? What do you have in dinner?" I asked him thrice.
Mhm.
Then he cried.
Mhm.
There where I thought, realized that he doesn't get anything to eat in dinner.
Mhm.
And that's a 7-year-old child. No,
Yes.
I do not see any kind of negligence by the family, the whole family. In fact, Jintu Baria and family, wife and children were staying separately. His parents were staying separately.
Mhm.
That's that's something which I have seen in tribal belt here also. Once a
Okay.
son is married, they build their own house. They stay closer to each other, but kind of separate kitchen. Yeah, no signs of negligence by the family,
By the grandparents. Mhm. So,
by the grandparents.
yes, so Jintu basically was, he attracted the wrath of the family because he married Bimla, who's a Hindu woman. And that's why probably they were shunned. And he and his family, Bimla and he, they go to work in Madhya Pradesh. And there, yes, and there Jintu has an accident. He
Yes.
works as a farm labor and he has an accident. And after that accident, they come back to the village because Jintu can no longer work. And Bimla is also could have worked, but she is unfortunately not being able to give her full time in work because she becomes pregnant again, I think, with the third child. And she also has two children, in fact, three children. Ramprasad is also very young, three children to look after. So, I think that one of the biggest aspect of hunger that we are not the policymakers, I don't think they have seen. They say women's participation in the work, so we will have creche. But that this is related to hunger, the care of children, creche facilities, and common kitchen facilities. I think these are, of course, midday meal covers a bit of that, definitely. But this aspect, I think we have totally missed in hunger management. And many families like Chintu Bari are facing this problem.
I do agree. Let me also narrate a little bit of Jintu's journey. It's true that it was inter-community marriage rather. He is a tribal person, and he married to a Hindu lady. And the resistance from the community, and he faced that resistance, and he migrated. That's something we understand is the cause of migration. But let me also tell the Balangir district is, it's a hotspot for migration. There's several families who is to distress migration. Look, it's not economic. It can be economic migration, but it's certainly not a beneficial migration. It's distress migration. People do not have anything to do there. It's a drought-prone belt. People, agriculture is not very profiteering, and work like NREG, which I narrated in the second story. I did a very in-depth story on what kind of, why so much of chronic deaths in Balangir, and found out that NREG, which is a flagship scheme for rural employment, that is not actually functioning those days. The situation now is different. We're not going to discuss the situation now. But that time NREG was not functioning very well. There was a delayed payment. People are not getting work.
2009. This is 2009.
It was 2009.
Okay. Yes.
And people do migrate to work in bricklanes in Andhra and Tamil Nadu, to work in Jintu. In fact, went to Madhya Pradesh first to work in agricultural labor, where he was electrocuted and partially paralyzed. That also shows the precariousness of a family. If a main earning member is handicapped, is disabled for whatever reason, then see the condition of the whole family. A whole family is likely to be wiped out. If the state support doesn't come, that's most likely the chance. I have done several starvation reporting those days, and we found that in most of the cases, or almost all the cases, starvation death takes place. One of the reasons is the state support didn't come. Chintu didn't have an APL or BPL card. He didn't have the agricultural land. NREG was not working. What does a family do then? They have to migrate. And back in home, one APL card was there with the parents. In KBK region, under the APL card, APL is above poverty line, BPL is below poverty line. Those PDS, public distribution system cards, under that they get some subsidized rice. So their parents were getting some 25 kg rice, and they are giving half of that to the son's family. And his parents, Champi Baria and Minji Baria. They are 70-year-old and 80-year-old. One of them were getting old age pensions. That's like 200 rupees or something. But 200, 300 rupees is
Yeah.
No, yeah. Mother was not getting, even though she was eligible. Jintu Bore himself was eligible for a card, which he was given after the death of his wife and children. So it's also state's responsibility to
Yes.
at least implement the existing schemes. If you do not implement, then this is something which will happen. They were also getting some community support. But I have visited that village.
Yes. Yes.
People are not rich there. People are extremely poor. How much a poor family can help another poor family? That's also limitations. So yeah, this is the situation. Coming to
Yes.
the craze, that's something I think that's that's the debate which we have been doing for many years. For empowerment of women, you have to give some support.
Anganwadi type support.
Element to one. Anganwadi is one, but under the NREG, that's the region where we had crèche system. But generally speaking, for working women, whether it is a educated women working in formal sector or in not or a illiterate women working in an informal sector, in whichever way we have to give those support. Otherwise, the economic empowerment of women, which is key for women empowerment, will not be successful, and government must now invest
You were
in a
saying in
huge.
your chapter on Jintu's starvation death that whenever there's a starvation death, the BDO and the state secretary has to answer. So BDO could not say anything, and the panchayat leaders also could not say anything why Jintu didn't have a card and why Minji's pension is not coming, meaning Jintu's elderly mother. Why her pension is not coming
Yeah,
and why
that's
Jintu did not get a card.
we we did ask those questions to the authorities there. We met the collector, then we met the local authorities. Nobody had actually the answer.
Yes.
But it's not all their fault. For at least the BPL card and APL card, it's not totally their fault. At the national level, then now in current age, it's National Food Security Act, which has supplanted the old PDS system. In the PDS system, it's a policy level failure also, apart from the implementation failure. What central government does is to fix a quota for every state, and which quotas are not realistic. They fix some level. So for example, okay, 2 lakh families in Odisha will get BPL cards. And in reality, it may actually be 3 lakh family. I mean, you have to do a survey. So because they are fixing such quota, once that quota is over, the state government cannot give any card to the needy people. And this survey is also not regularly done. The last survey which was in place was in 1997. So I am speaking about 2009. So what about those families, new families which have come up in last 12 or 13 years, and they are poor and they are not getting any card?
And maybe in 1997,
Despite
Jintu may have also been in Madhya Pradesh. So, somewhere you mentioned
No, I actually didn't. I cannot say that. But the facts which at this moment I cannot say. That's also a reason that if a person migrates, the person is also deprived of the necessary, government support comes at the source. That's a permanent problem with migration.
The migrant is left out in both cases. In the case of the host
In
state,
both cases,
they are not getting anything, and in the case of the native state, also they are. So the migrant is actually very vulnerable, becoming extremely vulnerable where these APL and BPL cards are concerned.
Yes. The Jintubare is a case of migration, but in the second chapter, if you see, I have dealt with at least in depth 2 cases. Nidhi Biswal and Rahasa Bhoi. These are 2 people who died of starvation, and they were regular migrant laborers. And in both the cases, they didn't have this card. So that's a policy level failure, both and implementation level failure. Implementation level failure because Supreme Court has time and again told in different orders that a needy person should be given under the AAY, under the Anna Yojana card, where the person is entitled for 35 kg of rice.
Right.
And the old age pensions, all these welfare schemes are not properly implemented. And what about NREGA? That's a scheme which primarily was aimed at checking the distress migration. Why that should not work? That should work. But it was not working in Balangir. And it didn't actually stop the distress migration. It did check distress migration to certain level. I have interacted with families. What happens is the delay payment actually causes a lot of problem for poorest of the poor section.
Of course.
Otherwise, if a person is not poorest of the poor, but the person has some agricultural land, he can earn something, and he can bear this delay of payment. I mean, for example, he is getting some income from agricultural land, some subsidized rice coming from the PDS system, and then NREGS, for example, giving 30 or 40 days of employment. Even if the money comes, the wages comes after 2 months, they can bear that. But that's comparatively people who are having some other source of income. But for cases of Jintu Baria, if they have no source of income, then they are bound to migrate. Yeah.
Actually, I was wondering, I mean, when I visited Bolangir and, Jharsuguda areas, I think it was in 2010. Yes, 2010. There some NGOs were trying to build up, food security within the village. So, and I saw a very interesting thing of the World Bank that, in malnutrition, many times it happens that the families do not know what to cook, what to prepare and what to cook, because cooking is also a state of access to food and having regularity and assurance of food. So, this dinner not being cooked is almost true across, not only across India in villages, but also is true in many places in slums. In fact, in the slum that is next to my place in Faridabad, cooking dinner, they often spend money to buy food, if they're feeling hungry in the night. But I think this cooking dinner is also a class affair, because only people who are assured of food, they can cook dinner, So I read it in Henry Louis Morgan's Ancient Society, cooking and nutrition and food security, they're very well connected. So I was wondering that, I mean, next time when you go and I know that you're going to do this work more and more. So how about in the next session, we'll have a detailed discussion how to create food security within the village. And probably a system of reporting by some Antodaya or Asha Didis or whatever on illness. And if the Asha Didi is sensing that there is hunger in any family, how to report that, how to preempt that kind of hunger death.
No, the question now is, for example, Asa or the Anganwadi lady knows that this family is living under hunger, and the lady reports it to who? The panchayat. What does the panchayat do then? Okay, what does the panchayat do then? That's the key question.
Yes.
It's not that people do not know in a village. In a village, people know who is living in hunger.
Exactly.
Who is a, but now the National Food Security Act is in place. That has taken the place of the PDS system, public distribution system. Under National Food Security Act, a family is entitled to get the quota price, which is 5 kg per head. Yes. Right. See the unfortunate aspect that it was rolled out. It was an ambitious plan, which is good in a way, better than the PDS system. But all of a sudden, then Aadhaar came. And this biometric linkage was compulsorily done with all the families. And at one point in Odisha itself, 18 lakh families were excluded.
Exactly.
Eventually, some of them were taken in, but the bringing in technology should actually help people, should be inclusive in approach, right, not exclusive in approach. Exactly. Unfortunately, this whole Aadhaar thing, which is being compulsorily linked with welfare scheme, is exclusionary in nature.
Absolutely.
For several reasons. One, that poor people cannot reach out to the authorities to get an Aadhaar card.
Right.
If at all government is adopting technology, it's the responsibility of the government to give that technology to people. Technology is something a common man cannot use. It's technical. You and I can use.
Yes.
A poor person telling his land, tell me what does he know about the technology? Since such kind of bringing in unnecessary technology
Exactly.
also introduces the clout of the middleman. Then you have to depend on the middleman. He or she exploits you at some level.
The Aadhaar
Then you have
agent, the Aadhaar
Aadhaar is
agent
also
political power has increased enormously. Aadhaar agent,
yeah.
the political power of the Aadhaar agent
Yeah.
has increased tremendously. And that's the new Mahajan. That is the new Mahajan.
They have a lot of power.
Yes.
And what about the internet connectivity and all those hilly areas where people are living? Aadhaar is useless for them, meaningless for them. So it's not just creating food security in village, but also the what's called is proactive government.
Yes.
The government should not do anything which excludes poor people from their entitlements. To the proactiveness also. You must have seen in case of all the governments how proactive a government becomes to say push for a corporate, acquire land, driving out people using police force. If they show half of that proactiveness to implement the welfare schemes, I'm sure nobody in the country will sleep in hunger.
Exactly. There is absolutely no point why anybody should die of hunger, whatever the causes are.
Absolutely.
But we are at the end of the session. What we do is that we continue this session with the few of your next chapters, and eventually, I think, let us put our heads together, and then probably we'll call in some techie guys to see if we can, through technology, modify that in such a manner so that a person feeling hungry can go to a lamp post and put a thumb, and then immediately at the state government level people will know that I'm hungry somewhere. There's something like ringing the bell, that I'm hungry somewhere. I think for hunger we'll have a separate bell bajao campaign.
But before that, let me also tell you the whole aspect of fixing responsibility for starvation. That's something I have discussed in that chapter and in the next chapter. At one point, this issue became very big. Supreme Court, a series of cases were filed in the Supreme Court saying that, look, we have grains rotting in the government godowns, and you have people dying here. So Supreme Court intervened and fixed that Chief Secretary of the state will be responsible if a starvation death occurs. And in Odisha, what Chief Secretary did was writing a letter to the collectors saying, if starvation death occurs, entire administration will be responsible, where collector is a key functionary. See, essentially, it made the collector as a responsible person, fixing responsibility on the collector. And by effect, what happened is everybody's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. If a starvation death happens, nobody owns it, rather they are trying to cover up. What they did in case of Chintu Baria, they tried to make it a malaria-related death. So unless government takes responsibility, that yes,
on an
we
individual
accept
officer,
that
on an individual officer, yeah.
I mean, you first should accept that this is starvation. Otherwise, how can they address starvation or hunger? They will not. So it's also speaking truth to self, and be accountable to the people who you are in power for.
Excellent, Pradeep. Thank you so much for sparing your time, and thank you so much for the first phase in writing this book. It took a lot of effort. I know a lot of field work has gone in, and we'll discuss more of this. And meanwhile, I'm sure that you're also in the field quite often, COVID notwithstanding. And we'll see you next month in another session. So
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thank you.
till then, best wishes. And very sad to know these tales. Actually, I'm so happy that you brought these extremely sad tales, which you've written with a lot of sympathy, a lot of empathy, and they're looking like a tragic novel. And I'm sure that everybody should read your work. Thank you so much, Pradeep. Till we meet next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.